And the Immigration Minister Chris Bowen joined us just a short time ago from Jakarta. Chris Bowen, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure, Tony. Good evening.
Does the Indonesian government support your plan to build a regional asylum seeker centre in East Timor?
Well, Tony, today I've had a series of very productive meetings with Foreign Minister Lateline, with effectively the Immigration Minister Akbar, and certainly there was a very clear understanding and recognition from them that a regional process, including a regional processing centre, would be a very important step. And I think there's a recognition that we've got a regional issue here, and that bringing a more collective, a more consistent approach to the processing of asylum claims would have great advantages, would be more humanitarian and would be more orderly and a better way of dealing with this process going forward. And what we have agreed is that the Bali process, the Bali ministerial meetings, would be the appropriate way of progressing what is quite an ambitious and big idea going forward.
Because the one Indonesian comment we've seen at this end is from Mohammed Indra, who's the Director General of Immigration. He said, for us as the transit country, the processing centre will attract more asylum seekers passing through Indonesia. Now, did other Indonesian officials give you the same story?
No, but that does underline the importance of a regional framework. It underlines the importance of dealing with these matters consistently and collectively. So that's an understandable concern, and that's why we have, in the case of East Timor, a high-level task force working through the issues. In the case of Indonesia, Minister Lateline agreed to my suggestion that senior officials return to work through the details so there can be a concrete proposal before the Bali ministers' meeting in the early part of next year.
But Mr Indra's argument is that the centre in East Timor will worsen the pull factors, effectively, that drive asylum seekers inevitably in the direction of Australia.
Well, I don't think that would be an issue if you have it as part of a regional framework, and there are issues that certainly need to be worked through. Tony, this is, as I say, a big and ambitious idea, to have a regional system to deal with what is a very significant problem in this region. We'll have a series of issues to be worked through. There'll be a series of discussions. There'll be concerns raised from time to time. You can't expect an idea like this to be put up and then people to automatically reach consensus. But I have had very productive meetings today, including with Mr Indra being involved, where we've talked through these issues, and we have reached common ground that there is great benefit in pursuing a regional framework.
If it's a regional framework, does it necessarily require there be more processing centres, not just in East Timor, but perhaps in other countries as well?
No, not necessarily. Certainly our focus has been on Timor-Leste, East Timor. They've had a series of good discussions with President Ramos Horta and others there. The key issue with East Timor, I think, is capacity, how many people they think a centre could hold. You could have a model of East Timor plus others, but they're all details to be worked through. But certainly the discussions with East Timor and with Indonesia this far, and I'm sure and I'm hopeful Malaysia tomorrow, have been very productive. And there's been, as I say, a key recognition from all the people I've spoken to that this is a very worthwhile process, that a regional framework could be a very significant step forward.
Right, but you're absolutely not ruling out other centres besides East Timor as a possibility, is that right?
Well, it would be foolish of me to rule out possibilities at this stage of the process, Tony. We've had good discussions with East Timor.
Let me put that another way. Are you contemplating other centres as well as East Timor?
Well, we're not actively contemplating other sites, but we are in discussions with East Timor and Indonesia and other regional neighbours about the model that the regional framework would take. And of course, as a part of those discussions, there's going to be various models discussed, various options looked at. And I'm not going to rule in or out those options today. That would be imprudent of me. But we've had good discussions with the people we've spoken to today and yesterday, and they've been focused on a processing centre in East Timor, and B, a broader regional framework, and they are both very important.
Are you in discussions with any other countries about building a regional processing centre in that country?
No.
Okay, you mentioned...
No, as I say, Tony...
Sorry, fair enough.
No, obviously, Tony, I'm not going to rule in or out any possibilities, but we are not actively pursuing discussions with any other nation at this point.
You mentioned earlier that one of the key issues relating to a centre in East Timor will be how many asylum seekers it could house. Do you have any figure in mind? What would Australia like to see? Less than 1,000, between 500 and 1,000? Less than 500?
Well, Tony, these are, firstly, primarily matters for discussion with Timor-Leste. That's why we have a high-level working group. Obviously, you'd want a centre to have a substantial number of people in it. You'd certainly want it to have, no less than those sort of figures, 500 to 1,000. You certainly wouldn't want a centre with any more than 2,000 in it on a normal basis, because our experience shows us that that's an appropriate way of doing things. But these are details we work through. Certainly, they're the sorts of figures I spoke about with President Ramos Horta, but there's a lot of detail to go here.
That's an interesting detail, though, because there are roughly 2,000 or more, but not many more than that, asylum seekers currently in Indonesia who've been passed as refugees by the UNHCR. What would be the relationship, therefore, between Indonesia and East Timor in relation to the asylum seekers that are already in Indonesia?
Well, certainly East Timor has a view, and we have the view, that the relationship between Indonesia and this centre would need to be important. There'd need to be agreements through the Bali process between Australia, Indonesia and other countries, how the caseload of a regional processing centre was established, how the people were chosen to go to that regional processing centre, etc. We have a lot of asylum seekers through the Asia-Pacific region and a lot of asylum seekers seeking to get to various countries, and the regional processing centre would need to have an agreed framework for choosing the caseload that was sent there by Australia and potentially other nations. So this is something. These are things which the high-level working group with East Timor and the proposal which we're putting to Indonesia will be dealing with.
Put simply, would you propose shifting the thousands of asylum seekers who are currently stuck in Indonesia, waiting to get onto smuggling vessels for the most part, or a large part of them are in any event, would you propose moving those people from Indonesia to East Timor?
Well, as I say, Tony, the choosing of the caseload for the regional processing centre will be a key matter for discussion between the nations. Whether all these questions you're asking, whether there is a centre in East Timor alone, or whether other nations may wish to have centres as part of the regional framework, how you choose the caseload is detail that I'm currently working through with my ministerial colleagues, that I've currently been speaking to President Ramos Horta about, Minister Natal Gawa about, the Malaysian Minister tomorrow. These are all matters that these ministers have an intense interest in, as you'd imagine. What they do all agree on is that this regional framework idea has a lot of potential and could be very beneficial. But, as I say, it's a big idea. It takes a lot of work. It will take a lot of diplomacy and a lot of effort over coming months to get this proposal up and running.
Well, indeed, because that last point we just canvassed is quite important, because back in July, the East Timorese President Ramos Horta said that he wouldn't accept a transfer of asylum seekers from Indonesia, because he said if there are people in Indonesia who've already been interviewed, who've been cleared, they're already safe, in his words, and there's no point, therefore, moving them from Indonesia.
Well, clearly the idea of a regional processing centre is to process applicants for asylum who are outstanding. And that point that President Ramos Horta made is correct. But in terms of how you choose the caseload of people who go to the regional processing centre is a matter that we're working the detail through.
Yeah, it's fundamental, isn't it? Because the other alternative to shifting people from Indonesia or other places to the centre voluntarily would be to wait for them to get on smuggling vessels, intercept them, or wait for them to come to Australia and then take them there, which obviously wouldn't have an impact on the smuggling. It might even worsen it.
Well, Tony, I agree with this point, that the whole idea of this model is to break the business model of people smuggling. That's what the regional framework is about, to remove the incentive for moving from Malaysia to Indonesia, from Indonesia to Australia. If you break that business model, then you break the back of the people smuggling effort in the Asia-Pacific region. And we think that's a more humanitarian approach, a more consistent approach, and would have benefits for Australia, for Indonesia, and for all the nations of our region. And that's the detail that I'm working through with my ministerial colleagues. I know you want me to start ruling in or out particular models, particular options. The Prime Minister said in July that a regional framework had a lot of potential. My job here in the Asia-Pacific region is to work through that detail. That's exactly what I'm in the process of doing.
I'm not asking you to rule out models. I'm simply trying to work out whether we're talking about moving people voluntarily from one place to another, rather than wait until they get on people smuggling vessels and be intercepted or arrive at Christmas Island or something like that.
Well, certainly, Tony, what I'm saying to you is that the model that we will embrace, the model we'll be putting to our regional partners, is one which breaks the business model of people smugglers, one which takes away the incentive to move from nation to nation. Over and above that, there are details I'm talking through with Minister Natal Gawa and the other ministers.
Well, it's been reported that East Timor's former Prime Minister, Mari Alkatiri, told you that asylum seekers in East Timor would be a source of social tension. Did he say that to you?
No, we had a very good meeting, Dr Alkatiri and I. He certainly laid out that his party had already, very publicly, put concerns on the record about the proposal, but he very much made it very clear to me, both privately and in a press conference for the East Timorese media afterwards, that he thought there was great benefit in the ongoing dialogue and that he thought the proposal should continue to be worked up. He certainly indicated to me that it would be a proposal which would need to meet with the approval of the East Timorese people, and that's pretty obvious. President Ramos Horta has made the same point. President Ramos Horta said he was favourably disposed, that it would be something that the detail would be worked through, that he would be an advocate of the centre within the government as the president, but that they would need to work to ensure social and community support from the non-government sector in the community.
Are you prepared?
That's not only a perfectly legitimate thing for them to say, it's a perfectly obvious thing for them to say.
Are you prepared to agree to President Ramos Horta's request for assistance to give asylum seekers in East Timor, if they come there, temporary jobs, as he says, quote, so they wouldn't sit idly in the centre as prisoners? Would Australia give assistance to give jobs to asylum seekers if they arrive in East Timor?
Well, certainly President Ramos Horta and I discussed, again, the various models. He did not put to me exactly that model, and certainly a number of other people in the government made the point that they would want the centre to be a job creator and not a centre which would involve people working. But everybody is consistent on the point that there would be economic benefits for East Timor from this centre proceeding, and then I've made the point that we would only be interested in proceeding with the centre if there were economic benefits. President Ramos Horta did make the point, very legitimately again, that there would need to be educational facilities so that people could be learning English, etc., and their time could be put to good use, as it is in similar centres in Australia, and that's certainly something which should be part of the model.
OK, you've said yourself, we're nearly out of time, but you've said yourself the Bali process is slow. Are you sure there'll be an outcome before the next election in 3 years' time, assuming the Parliament goes that long?
Well, what I'm sure, Tony, is that this is the way to go, that the Bali process, and to their credit, set up by the previous government with Indonesia, and set up to progress these matters. What I've been endeavouring to do over recent days is to ensure that the Bali process has a concrete proposal before it, that when the Bali ministers meet, we're not just starting to talk about a concept then, but there is much more work, detail, fleshed out between now and the meeting of the Bali ministers, in close consultation between us and our neighbours, particularly. My focus over the last couple of days has been East Timor, Indonesia and Malaysia, that there is a concrete proposal for them to work through. And as I say, the signs from my ministerial colleagues have been encouraging that they recognise the benefit of a regional approach. But that's not to say there's a lot more work to be done by myself, by Minister Rudd and by all of us in terms of progressing this matter between now and the Bali meeting and beyond. Do
you have any timetable in mind at all? Because it's a multilateral process, it's a slow process, involves not only the ASEAN ministers but ministers from smaller countries as well. I mean, it is a difficult process to get something as complicated as this through.
Well, certainly what we've said is that it should be progressed under the auspices of the Bali process. That's not to say that significant progress can't be made bilaterally as well, which is what I've been doing here over recent days. And we've set timelines. So, for example, the first meeting of the high-level task force between East Timor and Australia will occur in 4 weeks. Ambassador Larson and other senior officials will be talking to the Indonesians over the period of the next 6 weeks. There'll be proposals put to both the Australian and Indonesian East Timorese governments, early next year, and then the Bali ministers will meet early next year. So what we need to do is to ensure that there's progress being made both bilaterally and through the Bali process, and that's what we've been doing.
OK, Chris Bowen, we'll have to leave you there. We thank you very much for taking the time to come and join us again on Lateline.
Pleasure. It's always nice to join you, particularly from Jakarta.